Good evening. Let's cut straight to it. In the next 60 seconds I'll explain why Prince Harry's new mantra, "I'm not unhappy," sounds less like a calm conclusion and more like a warning signal. He flies into Kiev with the camera trained on his serious face. He walks into Clarence's house for 55 minutes of tea with his father, and on the way out he throws to the microphones, "He's fine. And I'm happy." It sounds like closure. But for an older audience, the signal is different. Because when peace really arrives in someone's life, it is not declared, it is lived. Now let's slow down and unpack this in full, so no one clicks away after the first minute. We start with the scene that was meant to establish a new normal. Kiev. Harry in his familiar field uniform, fleece jacket, clenched jaw, carefully practiced seriousness. Next to him, words about wounded veterans, rehabilitation, the Invictus mission. On the surface, everything is correct. But beneath it lingers the sense that we're once again being shown the prologue to another explainer interview, first the gesture, then the commentary to the gesture, and only afterwards silence. Once, that sequence worked, audiences accepted the frame at face value. Not anymore. People over 50 know too well the real price of public declarations. They don't want how it looks. They want what remains afterwards. Then London. That tea pause with the king. Just long enough for headlines to be written, but not long enough for anything truly deep to occur. Cameras waited at the gates, reporters timed every minute, and after half an hour we already heard the line, "Yes, he's great." Dry, short, seemingly respectful. But here's what grates on the ear. If the focus was really on his father, as Harry insists, then why so many words orbiting around that focus? In a generation raised on the maxim "never complain, never explain," trust is earned not by headlines that announce we met but by the fact that no one hears about the meeting for weeks, precisely because it was private. When feelings are genuine, secondary sources fall silent on their own. And here enters the central line of this latest act, "I'm not unhappy." It does not land as a calm statement. It lands as a defensive reaction from a man too often caught mid-justification. Compare it with ordinary life. When your train is running on schedule, you don't pace the platform with a megaphone telling strangers the timetable is reliable. You simply board and ride. That is why Harry's declaration, addressed to what he called elements of the press, feels less like reassurance and more like an argument with his own reflection. And the louder the argument, the harder it is to believe that the inner room is quiet. There is another point older viewers detect instantly. Respect for people and for memory is measured not by how many words you spend about them, but by how absent your own self is in those moments. A visit to the wounded is not about the soundbite at the bedside, but the discipline that shows a month later when you don't have to say "we pledged" because the facility is already functioning. A visit to your father is not about the minutes counted at the door, but about time that no one needs to clock. If, in both these cases, we still hear "I'm happy," ignore the press, then the center of gravity has not shifted to service or to family. It is still locked on the narrative of self. Now to Britain itself, because Harry has promised to be here more often. A fine promise, but one that has long lacked simple confirmations. Not dramatic statements about security. Not another round of lawsuits accompanied by press releases. Just an ordinary routine: fly in, meet, leave. Without every step being staged as a bullet point in a media plan. Older viewers have a short memory for slogans and a long one for routine. When they see regularity, predictability, the absence of self-promotion, trust returns by itself without any "believe me, I'm not unhappy." Someone will say, "This time he kept control." And that's true. A handful of short remarks instead of lengthy revelations, no transcript of what exactly was said, and a visible attempt not to stage yet another source's whisper episode. Those are small steps. The question is, are they isolated, or are we witnessing someone genuinely trying to remove explanatory subtitles from his life? The answer won't come in the next quotation, but in the absence of any proud "C," no quotations this time. Self-control is never praised out loud. It is simply noticed. We cannot skip the theme Harry invokes whenever he wants to straighten the spine of his new happiness: support from the British people. But support is not applause in a news clip. It is the willingness to live side by side without a constant war through headlines, without measuring lawsuits against every cover story. And most importantly, it is not the words I feel it. It is the actions that remove the need to ask, believe in me again. The public, especially the older generation, trusts deeds, not slogans. So what would a genuine turn look like without IFS or 4nows? First, silence around the personal. Not calculated silence followed by the obligatory disclaimer we won't comment, but the plain absence of leaks, no family friends revealed, no sources clarified. Second, charity measured not in before and after clips but in solid outcomes. When people can grip a railing in a rehabilitation center rather than swipe a story, then the words "I'm happy, I've found my place" become unnecessary. Third, family encounters spoken of only in the past tense. Not "he is going" but "he was there." For an older audience, the past tense itself is a currency of trust. It's worth recalling the contrast that has become the standing picture of recent years: the quieter and steadier the work in London, the louder and rarer the Californian statements. This is not geography. It is intonation. At Windsor, good news arrives in the form of facts, not broadcasts. There, no one imports the phrase "I'm not unhappy." They simply live according to the schedule. The sooner Harry stops wrestling with that schedule, the sooner he will stop wrestling with himself. One more note for those watching body language. When a man is genuinely well, his shoulders open, not his list of talking points. He stops defending and ceases searching for someone to blame, not the press, not security, not those around who misunderstood. Defense always belongs to the past, even if spoken today. The future is action that carries no caption of "trust me, I'm fine." Yes, there will always be the temptation to revert to the old script: one step, one leak, one denial, one exclusive, and the cycle repeats. It is easy to switch that machine on. Very hard to switch it off. What is required is a new habit: silence that works in your favor. In Britain, that skill is valued above any explanation, especially by those old enough to separate sincerity from reflex. So let us settle the interim verdict without heat. This latest tour showed thin traces of change, fewer words, less self-promotion around the meeting with his father. But those are brushstrokes. To hold older viewers, a new composition is needed. 3 or 4 months of calm, unquestionable routine, and the phrase "I'm not unhappy" will evaporate on its own, because it will be obvious the man is occupied with life, not its commentary. And now, the moment many of you stay for until the very end. The final scene. The cameras are off. The door is closed. No one waits outside. And here lies the fork. Either 6 months from now we hear of a quiet visit only through a stray recollection in someone else's memory, or once again we see studio light at the gates. The difference is vast. In the first case, no one needs to say "I'm happy," it will be read in the way someone has learned to live without applause. In the second, we are destined for another cycle of "the press twisted me," "I was misunderstood," "what I meant was." The moral strike. Happiness is not a thesis for the cameras or a line thrown while walking away. It is never proven, it is confirmed. By silence. By regularity. By work that carries no subtitles. The sooner Harry stops debating with headlines and begins accumulating silence, the sooner the words "I'm not unhappy" will shift from defense to fact, a fact no one will need to pronounce aloud.